when we could be having a way to make sure that our family members get the education they need to get a job and move forward in their lives. Hello and welcome to Capitol Conversations. I'm Congressman John Tierney, and I'm pleased to be here today with a special guest, my friend Congressman Tim Walz of Minnesota. Congressman Walz represents Minnesota's 1st Congressional District and is a member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee. He's also on the Agricultural and Transportation Committees, and Congressman Walz has the notable distinction of being the highest-ranking enlisted soldier ever to serve in Congress. He enlisted in the Army National Guard at age 17, served for 24 years, and as a veteran himself, I asked Congressman Walz to join me today to discuss the unacceptable backlog and disability benefits and the claims of the Department of Veterans Affairs. So currently, there are roughly 400,000 claims at the Veterans Affairs Office that are backlogged, caused hundreds of thousands of veterans across the country to wait upwards of a year to receive important medical and mental health services they deserve. Congressman Walz, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me, John. More importantly, thanks for focusing on this issue. It's an important one.
Well, it is an important one, and you focused on it extensively during your 4 terms here, and for good cause. You're still only 39, having served those 24 years. But you enlisted at the age of 17.
I did. I think my father was a Korean War veteran, and I think it's kind of the thing you did. I certainly am proud of the service, and what you get back out of that. But I'm very appreciative of folks like you of understanding that the care that we show to our veterans is the highest responsibility we have here, keeping this nation safe and caring for our veterans, and getting this backlog under control is absolutely paramount.
Well, we're very proud of being the home of the National Guard.
Absolutely.
You know, the first muster in Salem Common. And so
we've had some experience with it. So,
well, we have a great group of men and women that serve regularly and have been called up numerous times in the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts on that. So we take it near and dear to our hearts as well. But tell us a little bit about the backlog.
Well, first of all, as you said, John, it's unacceptable. Since the moment I came here, as you were focusing on veterans issues, as we saw it, asking veterans to wait for promised benefits that were earned. This isn't a lottery. They didn't get something here for nothing. These are folks that left their families, served this nation, did what the vast majority of us didn't. We went on with our lives why they didn't. These benefits were meant to make them whole again mentally, physically, and as well as in their professions, making sure they get education. And when we make them wait an unacceptable amount of time, it puts all those things on hold. And I think keeping faith with those veterans shows faith with the next generation. With that being said, some of this could have been avoided. When you go into war, you need to plan what's going to happen at the end. And when we went into 2 conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan without the plan, I know it's something you spoke extensively about, warned us to be prepared, and in many cases that was not. A couple of positive things that unfortunately led to the backlog was that more of this generation of veterans are using the VA. We're getting them in. We're getting them the help they need. We're getting them those benefits they earned. And through pressure, again, yourself and others who asked us to keep our claims with the Vietnam veterans, we honored the claims of the Agent Orange claims on Parkinson's, and that added more people to it. Now, with that being said, that added a lot of new people to the VA. It put a lot of pressure on the VA fighting 2 wars. They were initially underfunded and weren't ready to go. That has been corrected. Secretary Shinseki has made this a priority, and it's kind of an all-hands-on-deck type of approach. We're whittling it down, but again, this is a zero-sum game. If one veteran is waiting, if one veteran in Massachusetts or Minnesota or anywhere else is waiting, it's too many.
Yeah. Well, it is, and look, it's a bipartisan issue down here, by and large.
It certainly is.
But we took great pride in 2007 when the Democrats got the majority to increase the VA budget higher than it's been raised in 70-odd years.
That's correct.
And we've tried to focus the money on that. We went to work on the GI Bill, tried to modernize the benefits so that Guard and Reserve people could take advantage of it and their families in the right circumstances on that. We tried a lot of work on the Workforce Investment Act. I know when we drafted that we put in provisions to try to incent employers to hire veterans.
That's right.
But as you say, there are a lot of needs, not just a few. There are a lot of needs. They make great sacrifices. They have considerations that need to be dealt with when they come back home on that. You filed a particular bill that I'd like to talk to a little bit. Tell us, if you would, about that specific piece of legislation.
And I appreciate your support as we talk quicker benefits delivery. Senator Franken from Minnesota and myself, yourself and a few others who have signed on to it, John, The idea here is that the VA, as you said, doing many, many good things. Best healthcare system in the world. I represent the Mayo Clinic, and those folks will tell you the VA system provides wonderful healthcare. The main problem in this backlog is on the VBA side, and one of the things is that
VBA would translate
Veterans Benefits Administration, sorry, as opposed to Veterans Healthcare, and they're two separate sides of the same entity. But I think sometimes many people confuse when they hear the backlog. Unacceptable and angry doesn't mean our veterans aren't getting the healthcare they need. That's a separate issue. But with this bill says let's use some other resources on this. There's exams that get you in. Say you have a hearing loss or something like that. You need to get scheduled for an exam. You need to go to a VA hospital. You need to get that done. Then your claim is entered into this, and that's where the backlog is taking. What we're saying is there's a lot of folks that have civilian data that they can get from their doctor or whatever that they did the hearing exam. Put that in, use that as supporting evidence, and kind of speed the process along. And one of the things that this backlog is being caused by these current conflicts specifically, and Vietnam for that matter, these multiple claims. There's multiple things wrong with people, whether they were hit with an IED or whether it's a back injury or whether it's hearing.
Which is different than people coming out of some previous conflicts.
That's correct.
When we talked to Secretary Shinseki, he's been
Yes.
very clear. And we've had hearings in my subcommittee on national security and foreign affairs on the whole Department of Defense transfer of information to the Veterans Affairs.
Oh, it's a huge issue.
And the computerization, the technical part of it. But what we're told is where somebody used to come out of the previous contracts, maybe one claim.
That's correct.
With no subparts, just the principal claim, you're coming out with an average of 8.5
That's
claims.
correct.
You have a claim and then 8.5 separate parts of it.
Yeah, you understand this clearly, and the part you're focusing on too, John, that seamless transition is really key down the road for long-term systemic change. Right. But what we're saying is, in the short run, is if it's very obvious that this person, whether it was missing a finger or whether it was hearing or whatever, grant the interim claim on that piece of it while you continue the more complex claim, because the taxpayers should expect us. Now, granted, the benefit of the doubt always in the side of the veteran, but you've got to make sure we're doing this right. You've got to make sure the claims are fair. There's a responsibility on the taxpayer dollars to merge those two. But what we're saying is let them put in this data. Let's speed the process up. Let's clear the claims that are obvious that no one's disputing. And it might not be 100% disability. It might be 30. But the issue that veterans are facing is these are folks that need to make the mortgage payment. These are folks that are in college, and another part of this bill says pay the veterans housing so they don't get kicked out of college and end up dropping out of their education. These things have a domino effect. If we don't get them in the system for mental health care, physical health care, if we don't get them the education benefits, if they're due a payment for a disability because they're not working, you need to get those things done, or it causes a chain reaction in their life that's negative. And that's why
we saw a lot of on the housing for students at the beginning of the year.
Correct.
And then a lot of concerns when the government shut down.
Absolutely.
On that. And so I thought that was a really instructive piece of your legislation that really was important to have in there to make sure they get the benefits in a timely way so they go and plan their life, as you say, plan to take the courses, plan to matriculate on time and get on with their lives on that. But the idea of being able to use the medical evidence from outside the VA, so you don't have to wait in line, which is, as you say, a little backed up on that basis, is good. And about 20% of those claims have been moving through, but we need to extend it.
That's
and your bill would allow that to go on and do it. And it's an important piece of legislation. So hopefully, the bipartisan nature of it, we can move it and get it done this year so that it gets done. We got to give some numbers to folks out there. I think that what they should know is that Secretary Shinseki and others are really working on this. That they have reduced the backlog substantially, about 34% since May. I think in May it really peaked up.
About 6 months, that's right.
It was way up there. In the last 6 months, they've cut about 190,000 claims down from that. But they had a setback on the 2 weeks, 16 days that we were shut down.
Unacceptable.
The Secretary said about 1,400 claims a day have been done. But the other thing that you have been working on with me and others on that is the idea of focusing overtime, 20 hours of mandatory overtime for our Veterans Affairs personnel every month. To whittle down that backlog on that and to focus them on the cases that have been there longest.
That's right.
That's had a substantial effect, don't you think?
A substantial effect. That the numbers waiting over 360 days, again, unacceptable, have come down. Secretary Shinseki is the right man for the job. He's strategic. He told us the numbers they've been projecting, they knew it would rise to May to where the peak was, and we would start coming down with a goal to try and release this by the end of next year. They're very, very close to that. But you're right. The shutdown, the unacceptable nature of the shutdown had an impact on veterans, and you cannot sugarcoat that, gloss it over, whatever it did. And again, another reason to not ever allow that to happen. I think, and one of the things that you focused on, John, and supported this that was really I think brilliant in how we cared for our veterans is the one reason that our VA hospitals didn't shut down during that time and care kept going is we advanced appropriated. Of all the funding in the federal government, the one that has 2 years is VA healthcare. And I can remember clearly you and I had this conversation. If these guys ever take us to a shutdown, let's not allow the veterans to not get the care. And I think that was a huge focus. And I think it's something we should think about with the 16% or so of the VA that wasn't covered by that, because this overtime, it shut those folks down. You're saying all hands on deck, get these folks out. And keep in mind, the bulk of these folks working at the VA are veterans themselves. They care deeply about this.
Is it over half of
That's
the
right.
VA?
So this whole myth that they somehow don't care, aren't doing a good job. We took them to 2 wars. We overwhelmed the system. We underfunded them for years, as you said, until we finally started to correct it. And then we shut the government down in the midst of this. Those are unacceptable. But I think folks coming forward and bringing pieces forward, as you mentioned, to fix and add to it, has had a significant impact. We are caring for our veterans better than we ever have before. Again, until every one of them gets their benefit on time, their health care on time, and gets reemployed, then we have not succeeded totally. But you're right, they brought it down. They're bringing the number down. The trajectory is there. I think you're right, focusing on the overtime with the claims. We have claims specialists now who are getting this done. And then we do have to look long-term on this. There's absolutely no reason a young man at 17 that signs up, that record doesn't follow me all the way through into the VA when I need the care, instead of dropping off and going into a paper file folder in St. Louis. And as I'm sure you've worked on this for a fire, you know this story over and over. It's true. And the same thing could happen today until we get that seamless transition. But those folks, it's not for lack of effort over at the VA, both from leadership and from the claims processors. They're working hard to get it done.
Well, you and I both supported an amendment this year from our Republican friend Mark Amadei to the appropriations spending bill on that, which basically said let's take $44 million worth of overtime and focusing on those regional offices with the greatest backlogs.
That's correct.
And on that, I think that makes sense as too. It's all targeting, prioritizing, trying to whittle this down. We just have to have, as you say, a strategy about working on this and getting it done. And I think that we've had some success in our district watching people get this kind of relief. But I don't know that everybody gets a chance to see the impact on a veteran's life when they come back and all the pressures that are on them. I know Elijah Cummings and I just managed to put through a bill on getting some relief for people that had houses foreclosed on.
Yes.
Which is a serious matter for veterans on that. Yes. But these are things they ought not to have to be worrying about while they're out there serving their country, but they're worried because their family is back here dealing with this kind of an issue. Then when they come back, if they're injured, then they have the whole thing, how do they start their lives again?
That's right.
Are they going to get the benefits? Can they get somehow rehabilitated to go to work? Can they get an education so that they work on that? And these are things that all fit together, as you say.
Well, watching you focus on this, John, and the folks listening who are veterans clearly understand this. I said especially the enlisted soldiers. You're talking about a very important piece. The soldier's job is stressful enough, but if they're worrying about what their family's doing back home in Boston or whatever, or in Minnesota, if they're worried about their housing payment and things like that, when we had rules in place that were violated and had people, I watch in testimony where wives who were pregnant and their husband was downrange fighting in Iraq were having banks try and foreclose upon them illegally. And so I said, if people don't think these types of things matters, it's a national security issue. That soldier's focus needs to be on their mission, and it needs to know that their family is going to be cared for by us. So when you think of the pieces that were being put into place, and not to mention economically when you bring them back, you mentioned the GI Bill. I think historically, when you look back, that folks are going to say, thanks, John Tierney, for having the foresight to make this change, make this modernization, both for that veteran and for our economy. These are wonderful folks who are willing to serve this country. Give them a chance to get employed.
Well, you're gracious, but I wish we could claim credit for it. But, it was a natural follow-on when you see what good the GI Bill originally did.
That's right.
And what a tremendous impact that had.
It was timed up.
Along with the veterans' housing and all of those things that really made an impact when people came back from World War II. It just made sense as we were looking through this.
Folks like me sat here as GI Bill. My father used the GI Bill. I mean, that's how our family got college educations based on that, and I would argue it's a smart investment.
Sure. But, given the increase in National Guard and Reserve impact and utilization on these conflicts more recently or whatever, that was the necessary component of that.
Smart.
But but I think that we'll put it to good use, and I think that we've got a lot of universities and colleges and community colleges in our area, and I'm sure in Minnesota as well, that are putting special focus on the veterans.
They're doing a wonderful
veterans organizations within the campus. They've got leadership there trying to make sure that they have a seamless transition into the classroom and into the campus on that, and that they get all the courses they need to try and make it as quick The next thing we have to do on that, obviously, is to make sure that where it's appropriate, veterans get credit for what they've learned and done while they're in the service.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, some of the things we've done, and we're in the early phases of it, this Vet Skills Act that we were able to pass through that said that if you drove a truck and you were certified, coming back and going through CDL licensing process, not putting the, your safety was not questioned and your training you had, of making sure that the Pentagon, maybe it's in some cases a half an hour more in the training that gives you the civilian license. And that is starting now. I see places like Mayo Clinic are advertising jobs for medical technicians with the appropriate military designator, the military occupational skill, the MOS. And so soldiers now know where to go look. There's a portal that they can go to and they can see this, and we can get them employed.
And it was useful, I think, when Congress pressed the president, and he responded, to set up a special commission on that, so that when the military is training people, whether it's for the medical field or for driving trucks or heavy equipment, that they put the extra time into developing those courses and that training so that it's compatible with a licensure outside when you get out.
Absolutely, and smart government. $105 billion a year we spend training folks, and to do their job. For a little bit more, it saves us unemployment insurance and the trouble on the back end to get them ready to go, and gives them the opportunity to move on.
Right, well, it stops the frustration. We had roundtables in our district, and veterans would come in and say how frustrating it is. They've been somewhere doing this job now for 3 years under really intense conditions, and to come out and somebody say you have to start at point zero and work your way through
and
again.
then we would pay for that.
And they get discouraged. Sometimes they would just get discouraged and not even do it.
That's right.
And that was a loss to everybody on that basis.
Smart, effective, efficient.
We need to keep moving in this direction. There are a host of other bills. I made a note of them that we're trying to get through this Congress on that. We want to make sure that the records are maintained efficiently, so that we've been working on trying to get the electronic format. There's about 175 of the 250-day average wait that is spent waiting for the Department of Defense to get its records on the veteran over to the veteran.
That's correct.
And that's ridiculous. It shouldn't be on paper at this point in time. They should be compatible.
I brought mine into my office to show my folks, and your veterans listing will know the 201 file that you guard with your life. You know well. And having that big thing, you're absolutely right. It's smart.
But 175 days. If you could cut that 175 days out, and process them quicker, so that
should follow you through life. It'd make it easier. Your care would be better. I mean, things that you're thinking of, John, that we talked about is that if you're detailing, say, being in the vicinity of concussive blast, someday in the VA system, they're going to want to know that there were 6 instances of this where you had mild concussions. That's going to determine your diagnosis, your treatment, and of course some of your benefits that are going to come with that. It makes no sense to not have that, because we have the technology available.
And we're looking to put some pilot programs out there where they could take particular conditions and have experts in the VA facility on that, so that they get a center of excellence where people have post-traumatic stress syndrome or traumatic brain injury, eye care, so that they can process the claims more quickly, because these experts get in and identify it, but also give people the kind of treatment and assessment that they really need and deserve on that. A tremendous problem with the TBI and the post-traumatic stress syndrome in our outreach clinics. And we always take great pride in our district. No veteran in our district has to go more than 15 miles to care.
It's wonderful.
Because we have the veteran hospital, and then we have the community-based outreach clinics. But we've doubled them in size in the Lynn one, and we're increasing the size.
They're full
the
minute you open them.
But they're great, and the problem is that we want to make sure we have enough personnel, psychiatrists, psychologists, nursing specialists. So we're talking with folks down there, and maybe I'll talk to you further about this, Tim, and signing up. We're getting the figures. We think it may be worthwhile trying to encourage more professionals in that area to go in to work for the VA. The VA tells us they've got a competition problem with the private industry, where there's just so much competition and higher pay. So we're thinking maybe if we give some loan forgiveness for students going through that path, that if they commit to working with the VA in those areas for a certain period of time, it doesn't have to be forever, but it's certainly to get us over this period of time where we're dealing with an influx of people from Afghanistan.
That is smart Iraq. Thinking, and it's noble job. I think it's very frustrating is when you watch people that indiscriminately, just complain about something, not understanding the professionals that are in the VA, trying to attract those people in there, because the care they give is absolutely paramount. And the fact of the matter is, the VA's core mission can't be replicated elsewhere. Those who have said they can go, where are they going to go? Where are they going to get that type of care? Where are they going to have experts that focused exactly on those issues they have? So I think those types of moves are brilliant, because they make sense. They get folks in there, and of course that cuts down the wait times for people.
So you're on the committee, the Veterans Affairs Committee, on that. Are you aggressively moving these bills? You get good cooperation from both sides of the aisle?
Excellent, and I think it's where members yourself and others who have been here that understands that this is about moving forward for the country. This is about cooperating and getting things done. The VA committee is one of those last bastions of great bipartisanship. The chairman, Republican Chairman Jeff Miller from Florida, and our ranking member Mike Michaud from Maine, wonderful advocates for veterans. Absolutely, fast friends with all of us. We do many bills together. We do field hearings together. I always tell people when they're getting really, really disillusioned or whatever, tune into a VA hearing and see that the commitment, and there's no reason it can't be that elsewhere. It's when folks, as you said, you're bringing bipartisan legislation forward, you're looking at it from multiple angles, it's coming to the committee, the folks there are working on it, the staffs work together. It's a real positive success story, as it should be.
Well, we're going to miss Mike Michaud with his run for governor of Maine right now.
Be a new governor, but he has been
a good
champion
leader
for veterans.
He's been terrific. And on the Government Oversight Committee, I do have to say our subcommittee on National Security and Foreign Affairs has had good bipartisan work, and we focused originally on Walter Reed. So we were able to go out there in 2007.
We should do more of those together. They're starting to. The secretaries are starting to get that, and the committee members starting to understand. You can't separate DOD from VA.
Yeah, we've got a problem here in Congress where we try to stovepipe too much. We have too many committees with overlapping jurisdiction, but everybody takes great pride in keeping to their own little fiefdom on that, and we need to work out and try to make sure on that. So what other things do you have on the fire with veterans?
Well, for us is now to try and move this. You got it on this. There's nothing like a good job that heals a lot of things. And this licensing issue, now we're moving to the state levels, making sure the states and some of those pilot programs are out there, and making sure they're able to get those licensing done as quickly as possible, not just the federal ones we've got put in. We have an issue, John. I know I've talked to you about this, and this is just some of those little things that you can fix, but they matter deeply to veterans. One of your National Guard soldier reservists who served honorably for 20 years, fought floods, fires, whatever it might be, and did a term of service, but were never called for an extended period of time on active duty side. Doesn't mean they didn't do training, doesn't mean they weren't overseas at something. They could even served right after 9/11, protecting the skies and the airports here. Because of how those folks were classified, they are not officially veterans. They get all the benefits. Really? They just can't call themselves a veteran. And so for a lot of my enlisted soldiers that are out there, this is a matter of pride. And we've been trying to push it through, got a little bit held up in the Senate. It adds no more cost, it adds no more benefits, but these folks
recognize them for what they are.
Yeah, they have to call themselves military retirees, which they are is fine, but they're veterans. And they train folks who went to war, and they may not have been at war, and they may not have got called up to go overseas to do a regular Army mission. But the National Guard, I'm talking to the place where it was founded. Right. You're the Minutemen, and you were there at a mission call. If you weren't called, we're thankful for that we don't have to go. If they would have been called, they would have gone. And all they want to do is be called veterans, which they are.
So have you had the hearings in the House on that?
We haven't. Started to move. It's in the NDAA. You supported it on that side of it, but I know we try to push it.
NDAA for our listeners is?
National Defense Authorization Act. Yeah. So we're trying to make sure that gets done. So I think it's just some of those things. And again, I watched, as the shutdown happened too, a very important program that was in there that would have been put on hold was funding for state veteran cemeteries. There's that part of our commitment to veterans too. The reason I bring this up is right before Veterans Day, we were in Minnesota, broke ground in the 1st District for Minnesota's 2nd state veteran cemetery. And I'll tell you what, that is a big deal, and it's a sacred responsibility. In too many states, you're exactly right, John. You've got your folks within 15 miles of care. That's exactly right. There needs to be cemeteries too, and this is a pressing problem. And so that funding was frozen for a while. We got it back. I think that's a great program. I think it should be expanded. I think the state cemeteries, where you're not going to get a national veteran cemetery, is a wonderful alternative, because they have the same standards. They're cared for the same way, and I know all across this country, those are sacred spaces.
Yeah. Let me put out a good word for the people that really work with us all the time. I know your people locally do as well. The Veteran Service Officers in our district, and the Veteran Service Organizations.
Yeah.
So when we were looking to get the community-based outreach clinics, we went to them.
Partnership.
They stepped forward in a big way together with the families and the veterans themselves, and really made the case on that. In fact, up in the Gloucester area, the case that Gloucester, Massachusetts had one of the highest concentrations of veterans in the country, because they pressed into service all the maritime folks in the fishing community during World War II. So these are things that came out. So because of the high concentration, they were able to get the community-based outreach clinic located up there.
Smart.
But it's good research, but good help done by the Veteran Service Officers who our communities have, one or sometimes they're regional on that basis, but they do a lot of good work and they help the veterans.
Isn't it amazing, John? Some states don't have these,
I know.
and I don't know how they do it. These are the point of contact for most of us in those states. That county veteran service officer is your point of contact and your navigator. And as you're right, they work with those veteran service organizations from the VFW, the Legion, the Disabled American Veterans, AMVETS, IAVA, all of them. That brings to bear on this, and it truly is the country doing what's right with collaborative approach. So
still the largest problem we have, and you may share it on yours, is transportation for our veterans. Getting some of our older veterans, when they do have to go to the Bedford facility, the one hospital that we have in the region, or into Jamaica Plain in the Boston area.
DAV.
The DAV has been doing a great job of transporting people, but we need better scheduling, and we need to make sure that this works so that people don't have that kind of trauma of how they're going to get there and get back.
Well, a few years ago, and we helped pass again, and your veterans will know this very well, up until 2007 with the new Congress you talked about, the reimbursement rates for veterans was 17 cents. That new Congress, one of the first bills they passed, raised that to 48 cents. Gas has since gone up since then.
A little bit, yeah.
So I know it's an issue, and it made people who say, well, what's the big, it is a big deal. And the reason those people are going to the VA hospital, because they went overseas and served to protect your freedom. So it is our responsibility to maybe get them the gas in their vehicle to go get the care for the wound they received in service to this nation. And so when we set that bar lower than what other folks are getting in government, that sends a bad message.
Yeah. Now we're very lucky to have such dedicated people working in the Veterans Affairs. I like the fact that you mentioned Secretary Shinseki a couple of times. I know he's been responsive to us on that. There were some efforts to integrate or consolidate one of the hospitals, and he took a personal role in it, as did we. Wanted to make sure that we're not doing things to save money at the expense of serving the veterans. And I understand the pressures and the balance that has to be made there, but I thought he was very good in stepping forward and making
sure
man
for the job.
It came down on the side of the veterans on that. So I want to thank you. I mean, you've been a real champion in this area, as in others. I know you do great work in the Agricultural Committee and on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And when you were talking about the veterans doing some of the domestic things that they do, well, when we have a huge storm or ways get blocked or whatever, I can remember National Guardsmen standing out there back in one of the big storms in Massachusetts, making sure that our bridges and our
they're your
roads and
neighbors,
like that
your
were
teachers,
protected.
firefighters, attorneys in town. So it's just it's a real success story. It shows, and I always say this, John, I know we talk about it a lot. If you really want to honor a veteran, then make self-governance work. Make this system work. That's the real gift they gave us to govern ourselves, and we have a responsibility to make it work. And I know you have been a longtime champion to just find solutions. You always approach it like a mayor, make things work.
Yeah, you have to be able to work with people with whom you disagree.
That's right.
And find some innovative way to move forward.
Critical.
You do that all the time, Tim. I really appreciate it. I want to thank you for being on the show. I'm glad folks in my district got to see just another excellent congressman down here working hard for their interests as well as his constituents' interests.
Pleasure to be with you, John. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.